Hey guys, Yoeven here from JigsawStack. So in today's demo, we're gonna be showing how we can bring AI right into your database natively. So one of the biggest examples is translation. It's one of the most common use cases when you're storing user-generated content in your database. You want to be able to translate that information for a wider audience. We're going to be doing a series of different ways of adding AI into your database, and today's focus will really be translation. And I'm going to show you how you can do this in your database without having to write any special code in a server to trigger a serverless function or any form of code. All you have to do is go to your Supabase dashboard and get started. Everything can just be done from your browser. So let's create a table. This is a fresh database. Let's create a simple table to showcase social posts. We want to focus on user-generated content. Let's first create a table. Let's use UID, a description, something that we can translate. Let's give it text and translate to Chinese. The language code for Chinese is ZH. You can check out JigsawStack with over 90 plus different language codes that you can use to translate. Now let's make description a required field and the translated text an optional field, because that will be done asynchronously after the value has been added. That's it. So we have a basic table of a description and a value that we want to translate. Let's save this table and get it created. Perfect. We got a table. Let's add a row to test it out. So now we want to add like, hey, my weekend was awesome. A simple social post. Cool. And we'll save this row. Perfect, cool. Now you can see the translated column is null. We want to automatically fill this value every time the row gets inserted or updated. We want to use something called Postgres functions. These are functions that run within the Postgres engine built into the Supabase dashboard. So it's super simple. We don't even need to leave the dashboard to get started. First, we go over to functions, create a new function. And let me copy and paste this. I don't write SQL every day, so not something that I can just write on the spot. This is a pretty simple function. The first check we do is to see what operation is happening when this function gets triggered. So if it's an update, we want to check if the description has changed. If it's not changed, we return null, because we only want to update the translations when there is some change to the description. If there is a change or it's a new description, we make a request to JigsawStack to get the translated text using our AI translator engine. We head over to JigsawStack documentation. We want to copy the route and the two fields we need: the target language and the text that the user has added to the system. We don't need the current language, as this is automatically detected. So you can have the user writing in any language and all of it can be converted to a specific set of languages if you want. Let's head back to the dashboard in JigsawStack. Head over to a key section. We want to create an API key. So you just have to create a new API key, store that key. I've already done in this scenario. You have to paste your API key as part of the headers over here. The request, the route you're trying to make, and the object. As you can see, we're trying to translate to Chinese, the same language code that we used to store in the column, and the description that we're passing in from the new object. That's it. That basically gets stored as a variable in the description ZH object. After we have made the request, what we want to do is process that request and store it back into that database in the same row based on the ID. And that's what we do over here. And that's it, simple as that. One thing we have to make sure is that the return type of the function is triggered, because if it's any other return type, it will throw an error because it expects the same definition of the column that has been created in the schema. So let's call it translate text. This is the function that we want to trigger every time it's been updated. Let's create the function. Simple as that. Now, as you saw in the function, one interesting variable that is not very common in Postgres is HTTP. How do you make REST API requests? This is an extension that you can add into your Postgres instance. Go to extension, search HTTP, and turn it on. That's it. You will have access to HTTP, and you can make HTTP requests to any instances, and you can bring AI into your database natively. Let's go to triggers. Now we need to set a rule that says that, hey, every time that row gets added to that table or has been updated, we want to trigger this function that we wrote. So let's create a trigger. Let's give it a name, say trigger social post. We want to run it on the social post table. So we'll be constantly watching that for changes. We want to only run it when it's insert or an update operation. And we want to run it after, so that it happens asynchronously. We want to run it per row and not per statement, so that every row that gets updated, triggers the function once, and a translation is being updated for each of that row, basically. And we pick the function execute. Simple as that. Now we just have to confirm it. It'll be added into the database, and that's it. Now we head back to the tables and let's see this in action. Hey, my weekend was, let's change this to great. So now we'll trigger an update because it's the same row. Cool, it made an update. Now, if I want to insert a new row, it should also trigger the same function and do that check for me. Hey, the event I went to yesterday was awesome. Pop, that's it. Super quick, super fast, AI level grade translation built right into the database. As your users add more and more content, you can add a new column and add more languages, or have a separate table to store the languages, however you want to define your schema. So even if I update the date, it shouldn't trigger the translation change. This because the check that we had initially to check if the description has changed. So if we do this and save it, you'll see that no triggers happen and no translation actually happens and re-triggers. So now if I say, hey, my weekend was not so awesome, that should trigger a change. We can add as many languages as we want and however we want to structure this. One interesting thing you could do is look at the column and get the language code from the column and make that variable dynamic in the trigger. You can add as many columns as you want in as many languages and automatically store this. And this is better than doing real-time translation on the front end, especially for social generated content, so that you save cost. Imagine every user trying to translate and you're calling an API just for that translation. It's going to shoot your costs up significantly. This is a good way to store it in a database, especially for descriptions that don't change very often. That's it on how you can add AI translation right in your database without leaving your dashboard. In the next video, we'll talk about some of the other ways that you can bring AI into the database natively without leaving your dashboard. Have a good one.